Hey guys, how's it going? This is Aaron Farrell here with Sellers Arena, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 5 major mistakes that I noticed from most Amazon sellers getting started in Amazon FBA. Let's go ahead and hop into it. So mistake number 1 is that you don't know what your product margins are. What does this mean exactly? Well, basically when you buy your product from China and let's say, for example, you paid $3 per unit and you sell the product for $25 on Amazon, well, you would want to know what exact margins you're working with after Amazon FBA fees. So there's a Amazon FBA calculator that you can essentially use to input all of these numbers in, and I could probably even do a video on that later on, but for this particular example, it just mainly comes down to understanding what those margins are, or how much money do you have left over after Amazon takes their cut and after you pay all the different shipping and logistics, from maybe China or from the US or wherever you're buying it to your house first and then into the Amazon warehouse, or maybe you have a third-party logistics company that takes it and forwards it for you, or you send it directly to Amazon. But in any measure, you need to understand throughout that whole journey, throughout the acquiring of the product and all the way to sending it into Amazon and hitting Amazon's warehouse and then leaving Amazon's warehouse on an individual unit basis, how much is that all in costing you? And once you start to realize, or once you start to understand what your margin is, then at that point you really can start to look at your advertising strategy and how you can go about adjusting it. Because, for example, on Amazon pay-per-click ads, or essentially everyone's going after the ACOS, or the average cost of sale, and what that is essentially just the ad spend divided by the amount of money that you made in sales. So let's say you made $500 in sales, it cost you $100 in ad spend to get those $500 sales. You would take the $100 divided by the $500 and then you would times that by 100 to get the exact percentage. So to make the math easy, every dollar you spend, if you got $4 out, that would be a ACOS or ACOS of 25%. 1 divided by 4 times 100 is 25%. And let's say, for example, your margin on your product is 54%, but in that particular scenario you would take 55 minus the 25, and that would essentially mean on every single unit that you sold through PPC, you're actually making 30% of that total purchase price. So if, for example, it's $20, then that means that for every sale that you're making, essentially making $6 in profit per unit. So you can start to extrapolate those numbers. Once you really start to understand those, then you can structure your paid ad strategy or any sort of marketing or promotions according to that number 1 issue of knowing your margin. Once you know those margins, then you're going to have a lot more clarity in your Amazon business. And then number 2, I think that kind of goes alongside this, is really looking at Amazon FBA as a short-term benefit rather than a long-term benefit, or really taking a look at things and looking at the short term versus the long term, but not really seeing that long term, only seeing the short instant gratification stuff. So in our society, oftentimes in everything that you see that where someone's trying to sell you on something, generally speaking, they're talking about how fast you can get a particular result. In Amazon or any business for that matter, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to go from immediately launching to making $10,000 a month profit out of one product that you launched, for example. Yeah, that can happen over time. It's just right out the gate, you're not going to end up just immediately making those profits. So if you're only looking at it in the very short term of things, then you may start to get frustrated when perhaps you're losing money in the very beginning. You're really going aggressive on your launch strategy and you're putting a bunch of money into PPC and it's not returning those gains that you were looking for, or you're still having having to work several jobs as you're running your Amazon FBA business because you're not quite in that spot that you want to be. And essentially you were sold the dream in a way that you would just be able to turn on this money-making machine and all of a sudden overnight leave the 9 to 5 and be making thousands of dollars a month. Any business, doesn't matter what you're in, doesn't work this way. You have to really start to initially, reinvest the money that you're making oftentimes to be able to get to the spot that you want to be in the long term. So it's not about how many sales you made today. It's about moving those levers so that way in 3 months, 6 months from right now, you're going to be well established and setting yourself up for success in the long run, basically building a long-term sustainable brand. And I don't mean sustainable like the environment, just it's sustainable as in the longevity of your particular product or brand on Amazon. If you basically are only worried about selling that hot item for that moment, let's say for example a fidget spinner, when those were extremely popular, you would have made a killing on that and you probably would have profited quite high on it, especially if you hit the market, basically right product at the right time. But the person that's selling the fidget spinners that was making $100,000 a month several years ago, they're not still making that kind of money on the fidget spinner. They had to evolve their business, or they had to essentially be trying to catch the trends all the time in order to continue to maintain the amount of money that they're bringing in. So you'd really want to look at it long term, like I'm really starting to establish this brand over a long period of time, and that's going to continually feed myself and my family for many years to come, versus I just launched this product and I dropped $2,000 or $5,000 in it and I'm not profitable yet. When's this gonna happen? I just launched 3 weeks ago. Why am I not a millionaire? And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of channels on YouTube or influencers in general, they can really start to lead people astray, making them think that it's easier than it actually is, and they're kind of leaving behind all the work that goes into it, and essentially kind of anchoring people to think that they're going to have an immediate result and that there's not going to be any issues, there's not going to be any evolution. It's just going to be launch a product and start making a ton of money, and that's just not the case. And you have to really invest a long period of time into your product to continue to make it better and better. Number 3, again, this goes along with the other two in a way, but essentially the glorious metric that everyone always looks at is the ACOS that I explained earlier, the average cost of sale. And oftentimes, if you're seeing screenshots, you'll see where someone has like a 5% ACOS or 10% ACOS, and look, I'm guilty of it too, right? Like when I have those situations and we're launching PPC campaigns and it's just absolutely crushing, I want to absolutely take screenshots of that and share it with people. It shows that how you can basically turn on PPC and start printing money. That being said, you don't really know the story behind those metrics whenever you see this. So if a company does have a 10% ACOS, that could mean that they're actually leaving out hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars over the course of a long period of time because they're too conservative on that cost for acquisition, and they're not really looking at it, again, as I was mentioning, in the long term. They're really only looking at it in the short term. So let's say, for example, maybe their margins are really, really low. Maybe it's only 15% or 20%, and they're only really making 5 or 10%, on a $20 sale, let's say. So that only breaks down to like $1 or $2 per unit. And maybe they're looking to kind of cut the cost even further. Well, that actually prevents you from a lot of expansion opportunities and finding more avenues that can bring you more consistent money. So a lot of times when I see a very, very low ACOS on an account, that generally means that they're leaving a lot of money on the table. Basically, what it boils down to is you just really shouldn't obsess over the ACOS. Yeah, it can be important, especially if you're a little more conservative and you're not in a growth phase. You're really just trying to continue to leverage PPC to hopefully increase your sales rank on organic, or you're using, for other means other than just like trying to purely create growth in the company. But you really have to look at it in a long-term perspective too. Like, that's costing you $12, maybe it's 100% ACOS. Are you able to maintain that over the long term? Yeah, in the short term, that doesn't make sense for you to constantly do, right? But if every $12 sale initially turns into $120 in the course of a lifetime value of that particular customer, let's say you're selling a consumable product, every 30 days they have to buy from someone, might as well be you, right? Well, in that particular case, pay a little bit more to acquire that brand new customer, but you've got the advantage of now, impressing them. Hopefully once they receive your package in the mail, they start to take your supplement, they really enjoy it. If that's the case, then they could be a long-term customer and essentially continue to buy that same supplement from you for the next 12 months, 24 months, 5 years. The sky really is the limit at that point. It's not being obsessed with that overall ACOS and really starting to look at it strategically on the long-term play. Number 4, basically you're expecting great returns on pay-per-click ads, but you haven't even got any sort of reviews yet. A lot of times I see people that just launched their product, they're starting to throw a ton of money at their PPC ads, and they're getting extremely frustrated because it's not converting into sales. They've got an extremely high ACOS, and they can't figure out why. Well, essentially one of the core components to selling a lot of units on Amazon is having a good foundation of reviews on your products. The average is around 20 something in a meta study I've read several years ago, and it was essentially saying up until that point, until you get at least about 20 to 22 reviews, oftentimes when people are clicking into your listing, they're not purchasing the product because it really has no social proof, no one that's gone before them and essentially can, put in a good review for the product. So in that regards, what happens is that people don't really trust your product or brand yet, so therefore they're not making the purchase. Number 5, this kind of goes along with all the other ones, but essentially you don't have any level of strategy. You currently aren't really tracking or measuring anything in your Amazon business. Like I've talked about before, there's ways to set up rank tracking. So if you have an objective of going after one of your main keywords for your product, and you're trying to rank up that particular product on that keyword, well, you may want to run an aggressive pay-per-click campaign that gets you up the page in at least the top half of the first page, so that way you're not kind of buried in Amazon on page 5 or 10 where no one's going and no one's looking. Basically, if you didn't have that strategy set in place that for this particular keyword you were going to try to rank, you may just set up your pay-per-click ads and now all of a sudden you don't really have that objective, so you just set up a campaign that's spending a ton of money to a bunch of other keywords, and then on top of that, if you don't have any product reviews, if it's a brand new product, you're going to actually get bad data, that particular scenario, because if someone's not buying, that's not going to be indicative of what happens later on when you have a bunch of 5-star reviews on your product, for example. So it's really being cognizant of like, what exactly are my goals, and really starting to understand all those other elements that I mentioned in this video. So that way for you, especially if you end up reaching out to me and getting on a call, well, maybe at that point you'll be able to answer those questions inside of your business. And the more clarity that we have inside of our business and the more ability to kind of have a vision of where we want to go, most likely the better off our results are going to end up being. And if you don't especially know your margin, then you're not going to know where to spend, and you could perhaps overspend significantly from the amount of money that you dumped into it because you didn't do it strategically. So hopefully these 5 things have been something that allow you to take from this concept and turn it into something in your Amazon business. Hopefully it's provided some insights for you. If you could go ahead and give us a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell to be notified of more videos just like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.